I still remember the exact moment my life shattered into a million pieces. The exquisite crystal champagne flute slipping from my trembling fingers, hitting the polished ballroom floor with a sound that somehow cut through the horrified gasps of 200 wedding guests. The champagne splashed across the hem of my custom-designed wedding gown, a dress I'd spent 9 months perfecting, now ruined in an instant, just like my marriage. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The champagne glass wasn't the first thing to break that day. My heart had already been shattered minutes earlier when my husband of exactly 6 hours decided to humiliate me in front of everyone we knew. Sometimes I wonder if I should have seen it coming. Maybe there were signs I missed, warnings I ignored. But when you're in love, truly, madly, foolishly in love, you don't look for reasons to doubt. You look for reasons to believe. And Michael had given me so many reasons to believe in our future together. We met 3 years ago at a charity fundraiser. I was there representing my law firm, one of the event sponsors. Michael was a guest of one of the firm's partners. He was charming, sophisticated, and looked absolutely devastating in his tailored suit. When he approached me at the bar and asked if the seat next to me was taken, I felt that flutter in my stomach that romance novels always describe but I'd never actually experienced. "Only if you're taking it," I replied, attempting to sound witty and probably failing miserably. But he laughed, a warm, genuine laugh that made the corners of his eyes crinkle in a way that seemed both youthful and distinguished. By the end of the night, we'd exchanged numbers, and I was already dreaming of a second meeting. Our courtship was everything I'd ever wanted. Thoughtful dates, deep conversations that lasted until dawn, passionate nights that left me breathless. Michael was attentive, affectionate, and seemed to adore everything about me. When he proposed after 18 months together, I didn't hesitate for a second. "Catherine Elizabeth Montgomery," he said, down on one knee in the middle of the botanical garden where we'd had our third date, "you've made me happier than I ever thought possible. Will you marry me?" The diamond ring he held up caught the late afternoon sunlight, sending tiny rainbows dancing across his face. It was perfect. He was perfect. And I thought our life together would be perfect too. God, I was such a fool. The wedding planning consumed the next year of our lives. I wanted everything to be flawless. The venue, the flowers, the food, the music. Looking back now, I realize I spent more time planning the wedding than I did considering the marriage. But Michael seemed just as invested as I was, offering opinions on everything from the invitation font to the flavor of our 5-tier cake. The day of the wedding dawned clear and bright, as if the universe itself approved of our union. My mother cried when she saw me in my dress, a sleek, elegant creation with delicate lace details that had cost more than my first car. My father squeezed my hand before walking me down the aisle, whispering that he was proud of me, that Michael was a lucky man. The ceremony was everything I'd dreamed it would be. Michael's voice didn't waver as he recited his vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish me until death parted us. I believed every word. When we sealed our vows with a kiss, the cheers from our guests felt like a blessing from the collective hearts of everyone who loved us. If only the story had ended there, with that perfect kiss and those perfect promises. But real life isn't a fairy tale, and my prince had a secret that was about to turn into my public nightmare. The reception began beautifully. Our first dance was to "At Last" by Etta James, a classic choice perhaps, but the lyrics felt written just for us. Michael held me close, occasionally whispering how beautiful I looked, how happy he was, how he couldn't wait to start our life together. After the dance, we made our rounds, greeting guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes. I was floating on air, my hand firmly in Michael's, our fingers intertwined as if we couldn't bear to be separated even by inches. Then came the traditional speeches. My father went first, charming everyone with stories of my childhood determination and expressing his heartfelt approval of the man I'd chosen. My maid of honor, Rebecca, followed with a speech that had me laughing and crying in equal measure as she recounted our 20-year friendship. When it was time for the best man's speech, I felt Michael tense beside me. I glanced at him, questioning, but he just smiled tightly and took a large swallow of champagne. James, Michael's brother and best man, stood up, microphone in hand. He was visibly drunk, swaying slightly as he tapped the microphone to make sure it was on. "Testing, testing," he slurred, to awkward laughter from the guests. "I want to make a toast to my little brother and his beautiful bride." A standard opening. Nothing alarming yet? Michael's grip on my hand tightened painfully. "Michael and Catherine," James continued. What a perfect couple. So perfect that Michael couldn't wait until after the wedding to celebrate, could he? A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. I frowned, not understanding what he meant. Michael's face had gone completely white. "James," he said, his voice a harsh whisper that somehow carried in the sudden quiet. "Don't." But James was too far gone, too determined to speak whatever truth he thought needed airing. "My brother has always gotten everything he wanted," James continued, ignoring Michael's warning. "The attention, the praise, the promotions, the women. Especially the women." He hiccuped, then grinned sloppily. "Even the night before his wedding he couldn't help himself, could he, Mike?" The room went completely silent. I felt as if all the air had been sucked out, leaving a vacuum that pressed against my eardrums. I turned to Michael, waiting for him to laugh, to dismiss his brother's words as the ramblings of a jealous drunk. But the look on his face told me everything I needed to know. Guilt, anger, panic, all flashing across his features in rapid succession. "What is he talking about?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Before Michael could answer, James plowed ahead. "To Michael and Catherine, may your marriage last longer than his faithfulness did. 24 hours might be a record even for you, bro." Someone, Michael's mother, I think, finally got up and tried to take the microphone from James, but the damage was done. The revelation hung in the air like poison gas, seeping into every corner of the room, contaminating the beautiful day I'd spent a year creating. "Michael?" I said again, pulling my hand from his. "What is he talking about?" The silence stretched between us, becoming its own answer. "Catherine, I can explain," he finally said, reaching for me. I jerked away from his touch. "Explain what? That you cheated on me? The night before our wedding?" He didn't deny it. He couldn't. The truth was written all over his face. "It didn't mean anything," he said, as if that would somehow make it better. "It was just cold feet. A mistake. One stupid mistake." A laugh escaped me, high and brittle, a sound I'd never heard myself make before. "A mistake? Like putting salt in your coffee instead of sugar? That's a mistake, Michael. Sleeping with someone else the night before our wedding is a choice." By now, everyone was staring at us. The beautiful, perfect couple having their first massive fight at their own wedding reception. I could feel the weight of 200 pairs of eyes, some horrified, some pitying, some, God help me, amused. "Who was it?" I demanded, my voice rising despite my best efforts to maintain composure. "Do I know her?" Michael's eyes darted to the side just for a second, but it was enough. I followed his gaze to a tall blonde woman standing near the back of the room, her face a mask of discomfort and something that might have been guilt but wasn't quite remorse. Cassandra Wilson. My colleague. Not a close friend, but someone I saw nearly every day at the firm, someone I'd invited to my wedding because I thought we had a good professional relationship. Someone who'd smiled to my face this very morning while helping me adjust my veil, knowing she'd been with my fiancé just hours earlier. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I actually staggered backward, bumping into the head table, causing the plates and silverware to rattle. That's when the champagne flute slipped from my fingers, shattering on the floor in perfect synchronicity with my heart. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked from Michael to Cassandra and back again, seeing the confirmation I didn't want in both their expressions. "Catherine, please." Michael reached for me again. "Let's talk about this privately." The suggestion that I should protect his dignity by taking our discussion elsewhere when he had just destroyed mine in public was the final straw. Something inside me snapped, clean and sharp. I picked up my glass of red wine and poured it deliberately down the front of his crisp white shirt and expensive tuxedo jacket. "Congratulations on your wedding, Michael," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I wish you and your one-night stand every happiness. The marriage is already over and I want a divorce." Then I turned and walked out of the ballroom, through the lobby and into the warm evening air, leaving my new husband sputtering and stained behind me. I made it all the way to the hotel suite we'd booked for the night before the shock wore off and the tears came. I collapsed onto the king-sized bed, still in my wedding dress, and sobbed until I had no tears left. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself, though that was devastating enough. It was the public humiliation. Everyone had witnessed my perfect day, my perfect love story, crumble into dust. My parents, my friends, my colleagues, Michael's family, all of them now knew that I wasn't enough for him, that he'd needed someone else even as he prepared to pledge his life to me. I don't know how long I lay there, oscillating between numb disbelief and searing pain. Minutes or hours later, there was a soft knock at the door. "Catherine?" It was Rebecca, my maid of honor. "Catherine, please let me in." I didn't move, couldn't move. My body felt weighted with lead, pinned to the mattress by the sheer gravity of my heartbreak. The door opened anyway. Rebecca must have gotten a key from the front desk. She came in and sat beside me on the bed, saying nothing, just stroking my hair as fresh tears leaked onto the already damp pillow. "I brought reinforcements," she said finally, and I became aware of other presences in the room. My 3 bridesmaids, my mother and my sister, had all come to check on me. "Oh, sweetheart," my mother murmured, her own eyes red from crying. "I'm so sorry." I sat up slowly, feeling as if I'd aged a decade in the past few hours. "Did everyone leave?" I asked, my voice raspy from crying. "Most of the guests, yes," my sister Julie said. "Dad's still downstairs dealing with the vendors and the hotel staff. Michael's parents took him somewhere, probably to yell at him. James passed out and had to be carried to his room. And Cassandra?" I couldn't help asking. "Slunk away like the snake she is," Rebecca said fiercely. "I'd have thrown her out myself, but she was smart enough to disappear the minute everything went down." A fresh wave of anger rolled through me at the thought of her. My coworker, someone I would have to face in the office on Monday and Tuesday and every day after that. "What do you need, Catherine?" my mother asked gently. "What can we do?" I didn't know how to answer. What did I need? A time machine to go back and never meet Michael? A different life where I wasn't sitting in a wedding dress that cost more than some people's cars, surrounded by women trying to comfort me because my 6-hour marriage was already over? "I need to get out of this dress," I said finally. It was practical, achievable, and suddenly very urgent. The lace that had felt so delicate and romantic hours ago now seemed to be choking me, the bodice too tight, the skirt too heavy. The women sprang into action, helping me stand, carefully undoing the dozens of tiny buttons down my back, lifting the heavy garment away from my body. I stood in just my slip and felt as if I could breathe again for the first time since James had taken the microphone. "And I need a drink," I added. "A very, very strong drink." Rebecca went to the minibar and returned with tiny bottles of vodka, which she mixed with orange juice from the room service breakfast we'd ordered that morning, a lifetime ago, when I was still a happy bride preparing for the best day of my life. The alcohol burned going down but brought a welcome numbness in its wake. By the 3rd screwdriver, the edge had been taken off my pain enough that I could think somewhat clearly. "What are you going to do?" Julie asked, sitting cross-legged on the bed beside me. "Tonight? Drink until I can't feel anything," I said honestly. "Tomorrow? I don't know. Go home, I guess. Figure out how to cancel the honeymoon. Call a divorce lawyer." The word divorce felt strange on my tongue. I was 32 years old and already about to be divorced from a marriage that had barely existed. It was absurd, like some kind of dark comedy. "You can stay with me and Tom for as long as you need," Julie offered. "Or come home with Mom and Dad." I shook my head. "I need to be in my own space." Michael and I had bought a condo together 6 months ago, but he'd kept his apartment as a rental property. "I'll see if he'll stay at his old place until we figure things out." "You shouldn't have to figure anything out with him," Rebecca said hotly. "He cheated. He's scum. End of story." I appreciated her loyalty, but even through my pain and anger, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. We had joint finances, the condo, all the wedding gifts that had been delivered to our home over the past few weeks. Disentangling our lives would be complicated. "One day at a time," my mother said, always the voice of practicality. "Tonight you rest. Tomorrow we'll help you get home and start sorting things out." They stayed with me a while longer, making sure I ate something from the room service menu, helping me wash my face and change into pajamas. Eventually, they left me alone, extracting promises that I would call if I needed anything at all. In the quiet of the hotel room, I picked up my phone for the first time since the reception. It was flooded with texts and missed calls, most from Michael, but some from friends and family who had witnessed the disaster and wanted to check on me. I ignored them all and instead opened my photo gallery, scrolling through pictures of Michael and me from happier times. Vacations, dinner dates, cozy nights at home. We looked so happy, so in love. Had it all been a lie? Or had he really loved me, just not enough to be faithful? I didn't know which possibility hurt more. Eventually, exhaustion overtook me, and I fell into a fitful sleep, still clutching my phone, the last photo of Michael and me, taken just that morning before the ceremony, glowing accusingly on the screen. The next few days passed in a fog of pain, anger, and practical necessities. I returned to the condo while Michael stayed at his old apartment, a temporary arrangement suggested by his parents, who had called to express their horrified apologies for their son's behavior and their drunk elder son's public announcement of it. I accepted their apology numbly, knowing they weren't responsible for their adult son's choices, but unable to offer much warmth in return. Every time I thought about the wedding, about standing there while everyone watched my humiliation, a fresh wave of anger washed over me, hot and consuming. Friends and family rallied around me. My parents helped cancel the honeymoon to Bali, eating the cost of the non-refundable reservations. Julie and Rebecca took turns staying with me, making sure I ate and occasionally managing to distract me with movies or games. But the worst part was still to come, returning to work, where Cassandra would be. My firm had given me 2 weeks off for the wedding and honeymoon. I considered asking for more time, but the thought of sitting alone in the condo with nothing but my thoughts for company was worse than the idea of facing my colleagues. So on Monday morning, exactly 9 days after my wedding day disaster, I dressed in my most confidence-boosting outfit, a sharp black suit with a blood-red silk blouse, and walked into the office with my head held high. The hush that fell over the reception area when I entered told me that everyone knew. Of course they did. Law firms ran on gossip as much as billable hours, and this was prime material. I nodded politely to the receptionist and made my way to my office, feeling eyes following me the entire way. My assistant, Marlene, met me at my door with a cup of coffee and a sympathetic smile. "Welcome back, Ms. Montgomery," she said, using my maiden name without being asked, a small kindness that nearly broke my composure. "I've organized your files and emails by priority. The Simpson deposition has been rescheduled for Wednesday, and Mr. Harrington would like to see you when you have a moment." "Thank you, Marlene," I said, taking the coffee gratefully. "Give me an hour to get settled, then I'll see Mr. Harrington." She nodded and retreated, closing the door behind her. I sat at my desk, took a deep breath, and opened my laptop. Work. Focus on work. I could do this. I managed to get through most of my emails before it was time to meet with Harold Harrington, the firm's managing partner and my direct supervisor. I walked to his corner office, knocked, and entered at his invitation. "Catherine," he said, rising from his chair, "please sit down." I did, noting the careful neutrality of his expression. Harold was in his 60s, a veteran litigator with a reputation for being tough but fair. He'd been something of a mentor to me since I'd joined the firm 7 years ago. "How are you?" he asked, his tone gentler than usual. "I've been better," I admitted. "But I'm here, I'm focused, and I'm ready to work." He nodded, seeming relieved by my professional demeanor. I won't pretend I haven't heard what happened. It's unfortunate. A massive understatement, but I appreciated his restraint. "Yes, it is." I agreed. "But my personal situation won't affect my performance." "I've never doubted your professionalism, Catherine," he said. "But there's a matter we need to discuss. It concerns Cassandra Wilson." My stomach dropped at the mention of her name, but I kept my face impassive. "What about her?" Harold sighed, looking uncomfortable. "She's requested a transfer to our Boston office, effective immediately." Given the circumstances, I approved it. Relief flooded through me. I wouldn't have to see her every day. Wouldn't have to share conference rooms or elevators or the break room with the woman who had slept with my husband the night before our wedding. "I understand," I said, trying to keep the gratitude out of my voice. "That seems like a sensible solution." "There's more," Harold said, leaning forward slightly. "Before the transfer was approved, there was an incident between Cassandra and several of the junior associates. Words were exchanged. Unprofessional words." I raised an eyebrow, unsure where this was going. "What kind of words?" "The associates made it clear they were displeased with her actions. She claimed it created a hostile work environment." I nearly laughed. "She created a hostile work environment for herself by sleeping with a colleague's fiancé." Harold's mouth twitched, almost a smile before he controlled it. "That's not an official position the firm can take, as you know." "But unofficially," he trailed off, shaking his head. "What happened to you was inexcusable, Catherine. I want you to know that you have the firm's full support." I hadn't expected that. Law firms weren't known for their emotional intelligence or compassion, but Harold had daughters my age, I remembered. Perhaps that gave him a different perspective. "Thank you," I said softly. "That means a lot to me. If you need additional time off, or if there's anything else we can do, don't hesitate to ask." He continued, "You're one of our most valuable assets, and we want to make sure you're taken care of." The meeting ended soon after, and I returned to my office feeling marginally better. At least I wouldn't have to face Cassandra every day. At least my workplace was firmly on my side. It was a small comfort, but I would take what I could get. The weeks that followed fell into a painful pattern. I threw myself into work during the day, taking on extra cases and staying late at the office. At night, I returned to the empty condo where Michael and I had planned to build our life together, now filled with wedding gifts I hadn't had the heart to return and photos I couldn't bear to take down. Michael called repeatedly, begging to talk, to explain, to apologize. I avoided him as much as possible, communicating only through terse texts about practical matters. When divorce papers became inevitable, I had my own lawyer reach out to him, unable to face the conversation myself. But about a month after the wedding, I couldn't avoid him any longer. We needed to meet to discuss what to do with the condo and how to divide our shared possessions. My lawyer advised me to meet in a public place, so we agreed on a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory where neither of us would be tempted to make a scene. I arrived early, securing a table in the corner where we'd have some privacy. Michael walked in 5 minutes late, looking as if he hadn't slept well in weeks. There was a certain grim satisfaction in that, though I tried to suppress it. "Catherine," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Thank you for meeting me." I nodded stiffly, not trusting myself to speak yet. Up close, he looked even worse. Hair uncombed, dark circles under his eyes, a defeated slump to his shoulders that I'd never seen before. "You look good," he said, attempting a smile that died quickly under my cold stare. "Let's just discuss what we need to discuss," I said, pulling out a notepad where I'd listed the items we needed to resolve. "The condo first. I'd like to keep it. I can buy out your portion, or we can sell it and split the proceeds." "Your choice." He looked pained at my businesslike tone but didn't challenge it. "You can keep it. I don't want to force you to move." That was unusually considerate. I noted it without comment and moved on. "The furniture and household items. We can go through them item by item, or we can agree that we each keep what we brought into the relationship and split the things we purchased together. Whatever you think is fair," he said quietly. His passivity was starting to irritate me. I'd expected arguments, negotiations, maybe even some anger to match my own. This sad, compliant version of Michael was harder to deal with than the fight I'd prepared for. "Fine," I snapped, harsher than intended. "I'll have my lawyer draw up a list and you can review it with yours." He nodded again, then reached across the table as if to take my hand. I pulled back immediately, and he let his hand fall to the table. "Catherine, I know you don't want to hear this, but I am so sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "What I did was unforgivable. I know that, but I need you to know that it meant nothing. It was one stupid drunk mistake that I would give anything to take back." I stared at him, feeling the anger I'd been nursing for weeks flare into something hotter, more dangerous. "You're right. I don't want to hear it." "Please," he persisted. "I love you. I've always loved you." That never changed, not for a second. "If that's your idea of love, Michael, then I'm glad to be rid of it," I said coldly. "You humiliated me in front of everyone we know. Do you have any idea what that felt like? To stand there and realize that not only had you cheated on me, but you'd done it with someone I work with, someone who was at our wedding, watching me say vows you'd already broken?" He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "I know. It's inexcusable. If I could go back—" "But you can't." I cut him off. "You can't go back and neither can I. All we can do now is move forward separately. So let's focus on making that as painless as possible, shall we?" He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I never meant to hurt you," he said softly. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I threw it all away. I'll regret that for the rest of my life." Something in his voice, in the naked regret on his face, made my carefully constructed wall of anger waver. For a dangerous second, I remembered all the good times, all the reasons I'd fallen in love with him in the first place. But then I remembered standing in that ballroom, the shocked faces of our guests, the champagne soaking into my wedding dress, and my resolve hardened again. "Your regret is not my problem," I said, gathering my things. "We're done here. My lawyer will be in touch about the rest." I stood to leave, but Michael reached out, his fingers just brushing my wrist. "Catherine, wait. There's something else we need to discuss." I paused, looking down at him expectantly. "The honeymoon," he said. "I know your parents tried to cancel everything, but the resort wouldn't refund the full amount. I want to reimburse them." This surprised me. The honeymoon had been expensive. 2 weeks at an exclusive resort in Bali, paid for mostly by my parents as their wedding gift to us. "That's between you and them," I said finally. "But they'd appreciate it. They lost several $1,000s. He nodded seriously. "I'll take care of it. It's the least I can do." With that settled, I left, walking quickly to avoid any further conversation. The brief meeting had unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. It was easier to hate Michael when I didn't have to see him, when I could picture him as a callous villain who'd never really cared about me. The remorseful, broken man in the coffee shop didn't fit that narrative. But remorse didn't change what he'd done, and it didn't erase the public humiliation I'd endured. Nothing ever would. Back at my office, I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting to Michael, to our conversation, to the wreck he'd made of the life we'd planned together. By mid-afternoon, I gave up trying to be productive and told Marlene I was taking the rest of the day off. I drove home in a daze, thoughts swirling chaotically. Part of me, a small, weak part that I despised, wondered if I should have heard Michael out, if there was any path to forgiveness or reconciliation. But the larger part, the part still raw with pain and humiliation, recoiled from the very idea. When I reached the condo, I was surprised to find Rebecca waiting for me, sitting on the steps outside the building. "What are you doing here?" I asked as I approached. "Shouldn't you be at work?" She stood, brushing off her skirt. "Half day. I thought you might need company after seeing Michael." The simple act of kindness, that she'd remembered my meeting and had come to check on me, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I blinked them away hastily as I unlocked the building's front door. "That obvious, huh?" I said, trying for lightness and missing by a mile. "Only to someone who knows you well," she replied, following me inside into the elevator. "So? How was it?" "Awful," I admitted as the elevator doors closed. "Not in the way I expected, though." He was repentant, broken. It was almost worse than if he'd been defensive. Rebecca made a skeptical noise. "Men like that are great actors, Kat. Don't let him manipulate you." "I'm not," I assured her. But it was still unsettling to see him like that. We reached my floor, and I led the way to my door, unlocking it and stepping into the condo that still didn't feel fully mine, despite the fact that I'd been living in it alone for over a month. Rebecca headed straight for the kitchen. "Wine or tea?" she called over her shoulder. "Wine," I replied without hesitation. "Definitely wine." She returned moments later with 2 glasses of red wine, handing one to me as we settled onto the couch. "So what did you decide about the condo?" she asked. "He's letting me keep it," I said, taking a long sip. "He's being surprisingly accommodating about everything." "Guilt will do that," Rebecca observed. "He knows he screwed up monumentally. He's probably hoping if he's nice enough about the divorce, you'll forgive him eventually." "Not going to happen," I said firmly. "Some things can't be forgiven." Rebecca studied me over the rim of her glass. "Good. Because you deserve better than a cheater, Kat. You deserve someone who would never even think about being with anyone but you." Her words were comforting, but they also reminded me of something I'd been trying not to dwell on. The future. A future without Michael. Without the life I'd planned. Without the certainty I'd thought I had. "What if there isn't anyone better out there for me?" I asked quietly, voicing the fear that had been lurking at the edges of my consciousness. What if Michael was it and I just wasn't enough for him? Rebecca set down her wineglass with a thud. "Catherine Montgomery, don't you dare. Don't you dare let that man make you doubt yourself for 1 second. You are brilliant, beautiful, kind, and any man would be lucky to have you. Michael is the one who wasn't enough. Not enough of a man to be faithful, not enough of a human being to treat you with basic respect." Her fierce loyalty brought fresh tears to my eyes, but this time I didn't fight them. I let them fall as Rebecca pulled me into a hug, stroking my hair as I cried for what felt like the 100th time since the wedding. "I just feel so stupid," I confessed between sobs. "Everyone knows. Everyone at the wedding saw. My colleagues, my friends, even strangers, the caterers, the hotel staff, they all witnessed my humiliation. How do I ever show my face again without wondering if people are pitying me or laughing at me?" "By remembering that you did nothing wrong," Rebecca said firmly. "You have nothing to be ashamed of. Michael is the one who should be hiding his face, not you." Logically, I knew she was right. But emotions aren't logical, and shame is a powerful force. The thought of running into mutual friends or being the subject of gossip still made my stomach clench with anxiety. "It's going to take time," Rebecca continued, sensing my doubt. "But you will get through this. You'll rebuild. And someday, this will just be a bad memory, A story you tell to warn others about men like Michael. I managed a watery smile at that. The cautionary tale at bachelorette parties? Let me tell you about my 6-hour marriage. Rebecca laughed. Exactly. And hey, at least you found out what kind of man he was before you had kids with him or wasted years of your life. In a twisted way, it's almost a gift. Some gift, I muttered, but I could see her point. As painful as this was, discovering Michael's true character now was better than discovering it years into our marriage, when disentangling our lives would have been even more complicated. Rebecca stayed late into the evening, ordering takeout and keeping me distracted with stories from her job as an event planner. By the time she left, I felt marginally better, the raw edge of my pain dulled slightly by friendship and wine. Alone again, I wandered through the condo, looking at it with fresh eyes. If I was going to keep living here, I needed to reclaim it, to make it mine instead of ours. The first step, I decided, would be to put away all the reminders of Michael and our relationship. I found a large storage box and began collecting photos, mementos, and the few items he'd left behind. His favorite coffee mug, a book he'd been reading, the throw blanket he liked to use when watching TV. Into the box they went, along with every framed photo of us together. The wedding gifts were trickier. Many of them were things I could use. Kitchen appliances, linens, decorative items. But each one carried the weight of expectation, the assumption that they would furnish the home of a happily married couple. Eventually, I decided to donate most of them and keep only the few I truly needed or wanted. By midnight, the condo looked emptier but felt lighter. With Michael's presence at least visually erased, I could begin to imagine a future where this space was truly mine, not just a remnant of a failed relationship. As I got ready for bed, my phone chimed with a text message. I checked it reluctantly, half expecting it to be from Michael, but it was from my sister, just checking in. Love you. Call tomorrow? I smiled at the simple message, grateful for the constant support of my family through this nightmare. I texted back a quick, love you too. We'll call after work, and set my phone on the nightstand. As I lay in the darkness waiting for sleep, I found my thoughts turning not to sadness or anger, but to something new. Determination. I would get through this. I would rebuild my life, reclaim my dignity, and move forward. And maybe, just maybe, I would find a way to make Michael regret what he'd done even more than he already did. The thought was satisfying in a way I wasn't entirely comfortable with, a dark pleasure that felt alien to my usual nature. But I didn't push it away. Instead, I let it sit with me, a small ember of something that wasn't quite vengeance but wasn't quite forgiveness either. For the first time since the wedding, I fell asleep without crying first. The next few weeks brought a new routine. During the day, I worked with a focus and intensity that impressed even Harold Harrington. In the evenings, I reclaimed my space and my life, redecorating the condo, reconnecting with friends I'd neglected during the wedding planning, even starting a fitness routine that left me pleasantly exhausted. The divorce proceedings moved forward with surprising smoothness. True to his word, Michael didn't contest anything, agreeing to my terms without argument. His lawyer seemed almost apologetic during our meetings, as if embarrassed to be representing someone whose wrongdoing was so public and undeniable. My own lawyer, Diane, was a shark in a pencil skirt, pushing for every advantage despite Michael's compliance. Just because he's rolling over now doesn't mean he won't change his mind, she warned. Men like that can turn on a dime. We need to nail everything down tight. I appreciated her thoroughness, but part of me wondered if it was necessary given Michael's apparent remorse. Still, I let her do her job, securing my interests as thoroughly as possible. About 6 weeks after the wedding, when the divorce was nearly finalized, I received an unexpected email from James, Michael's brother and the unwitting revealer of his betrayal. The subject line was simple, an apology. I hesitated before opening it, unsure what to expect. James and I had never been particularly close. He was 5 years older than Michael, with a different mother and a chip on his shoulder about his younger brother's easier life. I'd always gotten the sense that he resented Michael's relationship with their father, his career success, and perhaps even his relationship with me. Finally, curiosity won out, and I clicked on the message. Catherine, it began. I've started this email a dozen times and deleted it each time. There's no good way to approach you after what happened, but I feel I owe you an explanation and an apology. First, I want you to know that I never intended to reveal Michael's infidelity at your wedding. I was drunk, angry, and still processing what I'd learned just hours before. That's not an excuse. There is no excuse for ruining what should have been the happiest day of your life. But it is the truth. I found out about Michael and Cassandra by accident. I arrived at the hotel early to help Michael get ready, but he wasn't in his room. I called his cell and he didn't answer. Eventually, I used the spare key he'd given me and found evidence that he hadn't slept there alone. When he finally showed up, freshly showered and looking guilty as hell, I confronted him. He admitted everything but begged me not to tell you. He said it was a mistake, that he loved you, that it would never happen again. I agreed to keep his secret, not for his sake, but because I thought you deserved a perfect wedding day. I planned to talk to him afterward, to convince him to come clean to you before you began your married life together. But then the alcohol hit, and all I could think about was how Michael always got away with everything, how he always had it easy, how he was about to get away with betraying someone as amazing as you. The words just came out. I'm not proud of it. I know my apology doesn't fix anything. I know you probably hate me, and you have every right to. But for what it's worth, I am deeply, profoundly sorry for the pain I caused you. Not for exposing Michael, he deserved that, but for how and when I did it. If there's ever anything I can do for you, please don't hesitate to ask. I doubt you'll want any connection to the Evans family after this, but if you ever need anything at all, I'm here. With sincere regret, James. I read the email twice, unsure how to feel about it. On one hand, James had caused the public aspect of my humiliation. On the other hand, he had revealed a truth I needed to know, even if his timing was terrible. And unlike Michael, he seemed genuinely remorseful without any expectation of forgiveness or reconciliation. After consideration, I decided to reply, James, thank you for your email. I appreciate your honesty and your apology. While I wish I had learned about Michael's infidelity in a different way, I am grateful that I learned about it before wasting years of my life with someone who could betray me so easily. In that sense, I suppose I owe you a debt of gratitude, however painfully it was delivered. I don't hate you. I'm still processing everything that happened, but I understand that you were put in an impossible position by Michael's actions, not your own. I hope you're taking care of yourself. Catherine. Short, polite, not overly warm, but not cold either. It felt like an appropriate response to a complex situation where there were no true villains, except Michael and Cassandra. James replied almost immediately with a simple, "Thank you for your kindness. You deserved better from all of us." I didn't respond further, feeling the conversation had reached its natural conclusion. But the exchange with James stirred something in me, a curiosity about Michael's perspective that I'd been suppressing. What had he been thinking? How could he have gone through with the wedding knowing what he'd done the night before? How could he have stood beside me, looked into my eyes, and promised fidelity when he'd already broken that promise? The questions gnawed at me, disrupting the fragile peace I'd been building. I knew I shouldn't contact him, shouldn't open that door even a crack, but the need to understand was becoming overwhelming. Finally, after a particularly restless night, I sent Michael a text. I need answers. Coffee. Tomorrow, 4 p.m. Same place. His reply came within seconds. I'll be there. Thank you. I regretted the message almost immediately, but I couldn't take it back now. Besides, maybe getting answers would provide the closure I needed to fully move on. The next day, I arrived at the coffee shop exactly at 4, determined to maintain control of the conversation. Michael was already there, sitting at the same corner table we'd occupied during our last meeting. He'd bought me a latte, my usual order, and it sat cooling across from him. "Catherine," he said, standing as I approached. "Thank you for meeting me." I slid into the seat across from him, noting that he looked marginally better than the last time I'd seen him. Still thinner than before, still with shadows under his eyes, but more put together, less devastated. "I have questions," I said without preamble. "I want honest answers. No excuses, no self-pity, just the truth. Can you give me that?" He nodded soberly. "Yes. Anything you want to know?" I took a deep breath, organizing my thoughts. Why Cassandra? Of all people, why someone I worked with, someone who would be at our wedding? Michael looked down at his coffee, his expression pained. "It wasn't planned. It just happened. We were both at the hotel bar the night before the wedding. I was there with James and some friends for one last drink. She was there alone. We got talking, I got drunk, and I made the worst mistake of my life." "That's not an answer," I said coldly. "Cheating doesn't just happen. You made choices. Multiple choices. To keep drinking. To talk to her. To go to her room. To take off your clothes. To have sex with her. Why did you make those choices the night before you were supposed to marry me?" He flinched at the bluntness of my words but didn't try to soften them. "I was scared," he said finally. "Not of marrying you, I wanted that more than anything. But of the finality of it. Of the responsibility, of potentially failing you someday." He gave a mirthless laugh. "Ironic that in trying to cope with my fear of failing you, I ended up failing you in the worst possible way." I didn't smile. "So it was about you, your fear, your issues, not about me or us at all." "Yes," he admitted quietly. "It was selfish and stupid and unforgivable." I nodded, processing this. "And the next morning? How could you go through with the wedding knowing what you'd done?" He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd once found endearing. "I told myself it was a terrible mistake that would never happen again. That I loved you, that I wanted our life together, that one horrible lapse in judgment shouldn't destroy everything we'd built." Another humorless laugh. "I convinced myself it would be crueler to tell you, to ruin your wedding day, than to keep it to myself and spend the rest of my life making it up to you." "Making it up to me," I repeated flatly, "while I remained ignorant of your betrayal." "I know how it sounds," he said, meeting my eyes for the first time. "I was deluding myself, lying to myself because I couldn't face what I'd done or what it meant about me." I sipped my latte, using the moment to collect my thoughts. "And Cassandra? What was her role in all this? Did she know you were getting married the next day?" His expression darkened. "Yes. She knew exactly who I was, who you were, that we were getting married. She ... He hesitated, then continued reluctantly. "She said it was our last chance, that she'd always been attracted to me, that no one would ever know." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. This wasn't a random encounter with a stranger. Cassandra had known exactly what she was doing. How long had she felt this way? Had there been other incidents I didn't know about? Michael shook his head emphatically. "No, never. I'd never even thought of her that way before that night. We'd met at firm events when you brought me as your +1, but there was never anything between us. At least not on my side." I wasn't sure whether to believe him, but it matched what I knew of Cassandra. She'd always been coolly professional with me, neither friendly nor hostile, just a colleague I occasionally worked with. There had never been any indication she harbored feelings for Michael. "One last question," I said, leaning forward slightly. "If James hadn't exposed you at the wedding, would you ever have told me the truth? Or would you have kept it a secret forever?" Michael was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know," he admitted. "I'd like to think I would have found the courage eventually, that my guilt would have become unbearable, or that I'd realize you deserved the truth. But the honest answer is I don't know. And that's perhaps the most damning thing about me." His honesty, however painful, was strangely refreshing. No more excuses, no more attempts to minimize what he'd done, just the raw, ugly truth. "Thank you for being honest," I said finally. "I needed to hear that." "Does it help?" he asked, a faint hope in his voice. "Understanding why I did it?" I considered the question seriously. "Not in the way you're hoping. It doesn't make me hate you less or forgive you more. But it helps me make sense of something that seemed senseless. It helps me stop wondering if there was something I could have done differently, something I missed." "There wasn't," he said urgently. "This was entirely my failing, not yours. You are perfect, Catherine. Everything I could have wanted in a partner? I was just too broken, too weak to deserve you." I stood, gathering my purse. "I should go," he nodded, making no move to stop me. "The divorce papers. My lawyer says they're almost final." "Yes," I confirmed. "Just a few more signatures and it's done." "And then?" he asked softly. "What happens then?" I looked at him. This man I'd once loved enough to promise my life to, now a stranger in familiar packaging. "Then we move on. Separately. I build a life without you, and you do whatever you need to do to become someone who doesn't cheat on the people who love them." It was harsh, but it was true. And as I walked away from him, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. I had my answers. They weren't pretty or comforting, but they were real. And reality, however painful, was better than the limbo of unanswered questions. Back at the condo, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the sunset and reflecting on the conversation. Michael's answers had confirmed what I'd suspected. His betrayal wasn't about me or any lack on my part. It was about his own weakness, his own fears. Strangely, that knowledge was liberating. I couldn't have prevented what happened. I couldn't have been a better fiancée, a more attentive partner, a more desirable woman. The flaw was in him, not me. As darkness fell, I made a decision. I was done letting Michael's actions define my story. I was done being the woman who was humiliated at her own wedding. It was time to write a new narrative, one where I wasn't just a victim but a victor. The divorce would be final soon. After that, I would focus on rebuilding not just my life, but my sense of self-worth, my confidence, my joy. I would become someone stronger than the woman who had walked down that aisle 6 weeks ago, someone wiser but not bitter, someone who could look back on this chapter as a painful but necessary part of her journey, and maybe, just maybe, I would find a way to make peace with what had happened. Not forgiveness. Michael hadn't earned that, and I wasn't sure he ever could. But acceptance. A way to carry this experience without being crushed by it. It was a goal at least. A direction. And for now, that was enough. The final divorce papers arrived on a Thursday, exactly 2 months after the wedding that wasn't. I signed them in Harold Harrington's office with Diane beside me, explaining each document before I put pen to paper. And that's it, Diane said as I signed the last page. Once these are filed, you'll be legally single again. The condo is yours. The financial separation is complete, and Michael Evans is officially your ex-husband. Ex-husband, I repeated, testing the term. It felt strange, a title I'd never expected to carry, especially not at 32. You've handled this with remarkable grace, Catherine, Harold said, surprising me. He rarely commented on personal matters. Lesser people would have fallen apart or sought revenge. Your professionalism throughout has been exemplary. I smiled tightly, not mentioning the nights I'd spent crying, the moments of rage that had sometimes overtaken me, the dark thoughts of retribution that occasionally surfaced in my quieter moments. Thank you, Harold. I appreciate that. As I left the office, papers safely delivered to be filed with the court, I felt oddly hollow. This should have been a moment of triumph, of liberation. Instead, it felt anticlimactic, just another Thursday with paperwork. I decided to take the rest of the day off, needing space to process the finality of what had just happened. As I walked to my car, my phone rang. It was Rebecca. Hey, I answered. What's up? Did you sign the papers? She asked without preamble. Just now, I confirmed. How did you know that was today? Julie told me. She got it from your mom. Listen, we're taking you out tonight. No arguments. Be ready at 7. Wear something hot. I laughed despite myself. Rebecca, I'm not really in a celebrating mood. Did I say anything about celebrating? This is a divorce wake. We're going to drink expensive cocktails, eat decadent food, and talk about how men are trash. But you're going to look amazing doing it, because the best revenge is living well. 7 o'clock. Be ready. She hung up before I could respond, typical Rebecca style. I sighed, but there was a smile tugging at my lips. A night out with friends might be exactly what I needed to mark this transition. At home, I spent the afternoon in quiet reflection, sorting through the last of Michael's things that I'd packed away weeks ago, but never actually removed from the condo. I decided to donate most of it, keeping only a few items of sentimental value. Not for Michael's sake, but for my own. A reminder of what had been lost, and what I had survived. At precisely 7, my doorbell rang. Rebecca stood there with Julie and 2 bottles of champagne. Pre-game, she announced, pushing past me into the condo. Nice dress, by the way. You look hot. I glanced down at the black cocktail dress I'd chosen, sleek, slightly shorter than I'd normally wear, with a neckline that hinted rather than revealed. Thanks. Where are we going exactly? Vault, Julie said, naming one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. Dad pulled some strings to get us a table. Vault? I repeated, surprised. That's excessive for a divorce wake, isn't it? Rebecca was already in the kitchen, looking for champagne flutes. Nothing is excessive tonight, darling. We're celebrating your freedom from a cheating ass, and we're doing it in style. I couldn't help smiling at her enthusiasm. Fine. But I'm paying for my own dinner. Like hell you are, Julie said firmly. This is our treat. You can get the next one. Rebecca returned with 3 glasses and popped the first bottle of champagne with practiced ease. She poured generously and handed us each a glass. A toast, she said, raising her glass. To Catherine Montgomery, who is too good for Michael Evans and is about to show the world exactly what he's missing. To Catherine, Julie echoed, clinking her glass against mine. I drank deeply, the champagne crisp and coldly refreshing. Perhaps Rebecca was right. Perhaps the best response to heartbreak and humiliation wasn't to retreat, but to emerge stronger, more vibrant, more utterly myself than before. All right, I said, feeling the champagne's warmth spreading through me. Let's do this divorce wake properly. The night that followed was a blur of laughter, expensive food, even more expensive wine, and the kind of deep, honest conversation that only happens with your closest friends after multiple drinks. We talked about Michael, about the wedding disaster, about the divorce, but also about work, about Julie's new boyfriend, about Rebecca's latest event planning triumph. By the time we stumbled back to my condo after midnight, pleasantly buzzed and emotionally spent, I felt lighter than I had in months. The divorce wasn't an ending, but a beginning. A chance to rediscover who Catherine Montgomery was without Michael Evans. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I found myself thinking not of the past, but of the future. What did I want now? Who did I want to be? The questions weren't anxiety-inducing, but exciting, full of possibility. For the first time since the wedding, I fell asleep looking forward to tomorrow. The next morning, I woke with a slight champagne headache but a clearer sense of purpose than I'd had in months. Over coffee, I made a list of goals: professional advancement, personal growth, maybe even eventually dating again, though that still felt distant and unlikely. At the top of the list, I wrote, "Find closure." Because despite the finalized divorce, despite the night out with friends, despite the brave face I was putting on, I knew I wasn't fully at peace with what had happened. The humiliation still stung. The betrayal still hurt, and somewhere deep inside, a small, dark part of me still wanted Michael to truly understand the pain he'd caused. I wasn't proud of that part, but I couldn't deny it existed. The question was what to do with it, how to find closure without becoming the kind of person who let bitterness consume them. I was still pondering this question when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but some instinct made me pick up. "Catherine Montgomery speaking," I said professionally. "Catherine, it's James. James Evans." I sat up straighter, surprised. "James, how did you get my number?" "From my father," he admitted. "I hope you don't mind. I wanted to talk to you about something important. An email didn't seem appropriate." I hesitated, then curiosity won out. "What is it?" "It's about Michael," he said. "And Cassandra. There's something you should know. Something I only found out recently." My heart began to pound. "What about them?" James sighed heavily. "They're seeing each other. It's not just a one-night stand anymore. They've been dating for about 3 weeks now." The news hit me like a physical blow. Michael and Cassandra, together. Not just a drunken mistake the night before our wedding, but an ongoing relationship. All his talk of regret, of the biggest mistake of his life, and he'd gone right back to her. "I see," I said, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. "Thank you for telling me. I thought you deserved to know," James said. "Especially since they're not being discreet about it. They've been seen around town together? It's only a matter of time before someone from your firm notices and the gossip starts again." "Yes, of course," I managed, mind racing. "I appreciate the warning." We exchanged a few more awkward pleasantries before ending the call. I sat in stunned silence trying to process this new information. Michael and Cassandra, together. The betrayal felt fresh again, a wound reopened just as it had started to heal. All his apologies, all his claims that it had meant nothing, and now they were dating openly? The anger came swiftly, burning away the shock. How dare he? How dare either of them? After everything they'd put me through, they had the audacity to flaunt their relationship publicly? I paced my living room, fury building with each step. I'd been trying so hard to be dignified, to take the high road, to move on with grace. And all the while, Michael had been what? Waiting for the divorce to be final so he could publicly date the woman he'd cheated with? It was too much, too cruel, too disrespectful of the pain they'd caused. My phone rang again, Rebecca this time. I answered, still pacing. "How's the head this morning?" she asked cheerfully. "Julie's cursing us both for that last bottle of wine." "James just called me," I said without preamble. "Michael and Cassandra are dating." "Openly dating? Being seen around town together?" There was a moment of stunned silence. "That absolute bastard," Rebecca finally said, her voice low and dangerous. "After all his tearful apologies and claims it meant nothing? What a complete and utter fraud." "Exactly," I said, gratified by her immediate understanding and outrage. "He's been playing me this whole time, Rebecca. Acting all broken and repentant while waiting to be with her all along. What are you going to do?" she asked. I stopped pacing, a cold clarity settling over me. "I don't know yet. But I'm done being the sad, dignified ex-wife. I'm done taking the high road while they laugh behind my back. Whatever you're planning, I'm in," Rebecca said immediately. "Just say the word." For the first time in months, I felt a smile spread across my face. Not a warm smile, but something sharper, more dangerous. I'll let you know. I need to think this through. After we hung up, I sat down at my dining table with a fresh cup of coffee and a legal pad. This required strategy, not just emotion. If I was going to seek, not vengeance exactly, but justice, it needed to be done right. I began to list everything I knew about Michael and Cassandra, their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, the places where a carefully applied pressure might cause maximum discomfort with minimum effort on my part. 3 hours later, I had the beginnings of a plan. Not a cruel plan, not anything illegal or even particularly vindictive. Just a way to ensure that they understood exactly what they had done and faced the appropriate consequences for their actions. It would require patience, precision, and a willingness to risk being seen as the villain in some people's eyes. But as I looked at my notes, at the pathway to closure I'd mapped out, I felt something shift inside me. The victim of the wedding disaster was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who wouldn't allow others to dictate her story or determine her worth. Someone who understood that sometimes the best revenge isn't living well. It's making sure those who hurt you face the natural consequences of their actions. I pulled out my phone and called Rebecca back. "I have a plan," I said when she answered, "and I need your help." "I thought you might," she replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Tell me everything." As I outlined what I had in mind, I felt the last pieces of my old self falling away. The woman who had walked down the aisle 2 months ago, full of trust and hope, was gone for good. In her place was someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who would never again mistake apologies for remorse or promises for commitment. Someone who was ready to write her own ending to this story, an ending where justice was served, dignity was preserved, and the only person who determined my worth was me. The plan would take time to unfold fully, but that was fine. I had nothing but time and the ice-cold patience that comes from knowing you're finally taking control of your own narrative. Let Michael and Cassandra enjoy their new relationship for now. Let them think they'd gotten away with it, that the damage they'd done was limited to a ruined wedding day and some temporary emotional pain. They would learn otherwise soon enough, and I would be watching when they did. The day after discovering Michael and Cassandra's relationship, I met Rebecca at a small cafe far from my usual haunts. I didn't want to risk running into anyone from the firm or Michael's social circle. This conversation needed to be private. "You look different," Rebecca said as I slid into the booth across from her. Focused. Almost scary. I smiled, feeling the unfamiliar expression stretch across my face. "I feel different. For 2 months I've been mourning something that wasn't real. Now I see everything clearly." Rebecca leaned forward eagerly. "So tell me about this plan. Are we slashing tires? Burning his clothes? Ooh, should I call my cousin who works for the IRS? "Nothing illegal," I said firmly. "Nothing that can damage my reputation or career. I'm not risking what I've built because of them." I took a sip of my coffee, organizing my thoughts. This is about consequences, natural consequences for their actions. "I'm listening," Rebecca said, looking slightly disappointed about the lack of property damage. "Michael and Cassandra think they've weathered the storm," I explained. "They've waited for the gossip to die down, for the divorce to be finalized, and now they're going public with their relationship. They probably think people will eventually forget how it started." "People have short memories," Rebecca agreed reluctantly. "Exactly. So we're going to remind them." I pulled out my phone and opened a document. First, the financial angle. During the divorce, Michael was so eager to appear remorseful that he agreed to everything. The condo, the division of assets, everything. But there's one thing we left unresolved. "What's that?" "The honeymoon," I said. "My parents lost thousands on non-refundable reservations. Michael promised to reimburse them but never actually did. He's hoping everyone's forgotten about it." Rebecca frowned. "So you're going to ask for the money? That doesn't seem very revengey." "I'm not asking for anything," I said with a small smile. "I'm going to take him to small claims court." Understanding dawned on Rebecca's face. "Where he'll have to publicly admit that he owes your parents money for a honeymoon that never happened because he cheated on you the night before your wedding." "Precisely. And I'll make sure several mutual friends and colleagues are aware of the court date in case they want to show their support." "Devious," Rebecca said approvingly. "What else?" "Cassandra transferred to the Boston office, but she's been coming back to see Michael on weekends. According to James, she's been telling people she requested the transfer for career advancement." I leaned forward. But I have emails proving she left because of a hostile work environment after sleeping with a colleague's fiancé. Rebecca's eyes widened. Can you use those without getting in trouble? They were sent to me officially as part of an HR matter, I said. I'm not leaking them, but I am going to mention them to Harold Harrington in the context of discussing my own career advancement. Purely professional, of course. Of course, Rebecca echoed, not bothering to hide her grin. Then there's the social angle. Michael's always been obsessed with his reputation, especially among our mutual friends. Right now, many of them are being polite about his new relationship out of respect for me. I sipped my coffee. I think it's time I let them know I'm aware of the situation and find it illuminating about his character. You're going to unleash the social shunning, Rebecca said with admiration. But wait, won't that make you look bitter? Not if I do it right, I said. No angry rants, no public accusations. Just calm, factual statements delivered with dignity. Yes, I'm aware Michael is dating the woman he cheated with before our wedding. It's clarified a lot for me about the kind of person he really is. I wish them well. The high road that's actually the low road, Rebecca mused. I like it. But the centerpiece, I continued, is the divorce hearing. Rebecca looked confused. But your divorce is already final. The divorce itself, yes, but there's still the matter of legal fees. I smiled again, that same unfamiliar stretch of facial muscles. I paid my attorney considerably more than anticipated due to the unusual circumstances of our separation. Given that those circumstances were entirely Michael's fault, I think it's only fair he contribute to those expenses. Can you actually do that? After the divorce is final? In special cases, yes, especially when new information comes to light. I tapped my phone. Like the fact that the one-night mistake he repeatedly apologized for was actually the beginning of an ongoing relationship he concealed during our divorce proceedings. Rebecca let out a low whistle. Wow. How much are you asking for? Enough to make him uncomfortable, but not enough to seem vindictive. The point isn't the money. It's having him stand in front of a judge and explain why he shouldn't have to pay for legal fees necessitated by his infidelity with the woman he's now publicly dating. And you think a judge will agree? It doesn't matter if I win, I said, though I think I have a good chance. What matters is the public record. What matters is Michael and Cassandra having to sit in that courtroom while I calmly, professionally detail exactly what they did and how it affected my life. Rebecca studied me with newfound respect. You know, when you said you had a plan for revenge, I expected something more. I don't know, dramatic. Keying his car or sending screenshots of their text to everyone we know. That's not revenge, I said dismissively. That's a tantrum. This is justice. They don't get to pretend what they did wasn't destructive. They don't get to rewrite history so they're the star-crossed lovers who found each other despite difficult circumstances. They need to own what they did, publicly and permanently. And if they refuse to show up? If Michael just pays whatever you ask to avoid the hearing? I smiled a third time, and this time it felt natural, like slipping into a perfectly tailored garment. Then I still win. Either way, there are consequences. Either way, they don't get to control the narrative anymore. Rebecca raised her coffee mug in a toast. To taking back the narrative. I clinked my mug against hers. To justice served cold. Executing my plan required patience, a virtue I'd never particularly valued until now. Each element needed to unfold naturally, methodically, without revealing the larger design until it was too late for Michael or Cassandra to counter it. I started with the small claims court filing for the honeymoon expenses. My parents had initially protested. They didn't want me prolonging the drama or keeping old wounds open. But when I explained my reasoning, my father's expression shifted from concern to understanding. You're not doing this for the money, he said slowly. You're doing it for the principle. Exactly, I said. Michael made a specific promise to reimburse you. He's broken enough promises already. He doesn't get to break this one too. My mother still seemed uncertain. But Catherine, the court appearance, having to see him again. Won't that be painful for you? I took her hand gently. Nothing about this situation isn't painful, Mom. But I'm tired of being the only one feeling the pain while Michael and Cassandra move on like nothing happened. Some discomfort now is worth it for closure later. She searched my face, then nodded. All right, if you're sure this is what you need. It is, I assured her. Trust me. The court date was set for 3 weeks out, enough time for me to make sure certain people were aware of it. Not through any obvious means, of course, just casual mentions to mutual friends who I knew would pass the information along. Oh, I can't make lunch that Thursday. I have a court appearance regarding some unpaid expenses from the wedding. Yes, things with Michael are officially over. Though I do have to see him in court about financial matters he promised to handle. Small breadcrumbs, dropped strategically where they'd do the most good. The next phase involved Harold Harrington and the Boston office situation. I requested a meeting with him to discuss my career trajectory, a perfectly normal thing for an ambitious associate to do. "Catherine?" He greeted me warmly as I entered his office. "Good to see you. How are you holding up?" "Very well, thank you," I said, taking the seat he offered. "I've been focusing on my casework, and it's been tremendously grounding." "Your billable hours have been impressive," he agreed. "Stuart mentioned you've been invaluable on the Westridge acquisition." I smiled modestly. "It's been a challenging project, but that's when I do my best work." We discussed my current cases and future opportunities for several minutes before I smoothly transitioned to my real purpose. "I've been thinking about potential growth areas," I said. "The Boston office has been expanding their corporate litigation department, and I understand they've had some staffing adjustments recently." Harold's expression flickered briefly. He knew exactly what I was referring to. "Yes, there have been some personnel changes," he said carefully. "I believe Cassandra Wilson transferred there a few months ago," I continued innocently. "Though I've heard she's been spending quite a bit of time back in this city recently." The slight widening of Harold's eyes told me he hadn't known about Cassandra's frequent returns, or perhaps about her relationship with Michael. "Has she?" I wasn't aware. "Yes, it seems she's found reasons to visit regularly." I maintained perfect professionalism in my tone. "I mention it only because I've been considering whether a similar transfer might benefit my career, but if there are interpersonal complexities at that office, I should perhaps consider other options." Harold leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Catherine, let me be direct. Are you telling me that Cassandra Wilson has been regularly returning to see your ex-husband?" I widened my eyes slightly. "Oh, I assumed you knew." "Yes, according to mutual acquaintances, they've been seeing each other socially for several weeks now. Given the circumstances of my divorce, this creates an awkward situation professionally." "Indeed it does," Harold said, his expression darkening. "Particularly given the reason for her transfer in the first place." I nodded solemnly. "That was my thought as well. The firm went to considerable trouble to accommodate her request for a transfer due to the supposed hostile environment created by her indiscretion. If that indiscretion has evolved into an ongoing relationship, it raises questions about the legitimacy of the transfer request." Harold's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. If there was one thing he hated, it was being played for a fool. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Catherine. I'll need to consult with HR about the implications." "Of course," I said smoothly. "I hope I haven't overstepped. It's just that professional integrity is so important to me and to the firm." "No overstepping at all," he assured me. "Your discretion is appreciated. Now about your career path." The rest of the meeting focused on legitimate career discussions, but I left knowing that the seed had been planted. Harold would investigate, and Cassandra's convenient transfer, which had allowed her to escape the consequences of her actions while maintaining her job, would suddenly be under scrutiny. The social element of my plan unfolded naturally over the following week. At a dinner party hosted by mutual friends, someone inevitably asked how I was doing after everything. "I'm doing well, thank you," I said with a calm smile. "The divorce is final, I'm focused on my career, and I'm moving forward." "That's good," said Jennifer, a friend from Michael's side of our social circle. She hesitated, then added, "I don't know if you've heard, but Michael has been seeing someone." A hush fell over the small group around us. Everyone knew exactly who Michael was seeing, but no one wanted to be the one to say it. I took a sip of wine, letting the moment stretch just long enough to become uncomfortable. "Cassandra Wilson, yes, I'm aware," I said finally. "They've been together for about a month now, I believe." Jennifer looked startled, clearly not expecting me to be so well-informed or composed. "You know about that?" "Of course," I said with a small shrug. "It made perfect sense once I found out." "It did?" someone else asked, unable to contain their curiosity. I nodded thoughtfully. "It explained a lot, actually. The night before our wedding suddenly seemed less like a random, drunken mistake and more like, well, something that had been building for some time." I smiled sadly. In retrospect, I should thank them for showing me who they really are before I spent years in a marriage based on lies. The group exchanged uncomfortable glances. I had just reframed the narrative entirely. Instead of Michael and Cassandra finding love after an unfortunate mistake, I'd presented their relationship as something more calculated, more deliberate, and far less sympathetic. "Have you spoken to either of them about it?" Jennifer asked hesitantly. "What would be the point?" I asked, my voice gentle but firm. "Their actions have told me everything I need to know about their character. I wish them exactly the happiness they deserve." The double meaning wasn't lost on anyone present. By the end of the evening, I knew my carefully measured words would be repeated throughout our social circle, painting a very different picture than the one Michael and Cassandra had likely been presenting. As the small claims court date approached, I received a text from Michael. "Just got papers about the honeymoon expenses. We need to talk. Can we meet?" I considered ignoring it, but decided a response served my purposes better. "Nothing to discuss? You promised to reimburse my parents. You didn't? The court will decide." His reply came quickly. "Catherine, please. I'll pay the full amount. We don't need to do this in court." "That option was available for months," I texted back. "See you in court." He tried calling twice after that, but I let the calls go to voicemail. He didn't leave messages. 2 days before the court date, I received a notification that the full amount had been deposited directly into my parents' account. An hour later, Michael texted again. "Paid in full. Please withdraw the claim." I smiled at my phone, then replied, "Claim withdrawn. Thank you for honoring your commitment, belated though it may be." It was a small victory, but a satisfying one. Michael had tried to avoid the public accounting, but only at the last minute, only when forced, and everyone who'd been informed about the court date now knew that he'd paid only under duress, not out of any genuine sense of responsibility. The next phase was more complex and required careful timing. I met with Diane, my divorce attorney, to discuss filing for legal fees. "It's unusual to pursue this after the divorce is finalized," she warned. "You'll need to demonstrate that there were extraordinary circumstances or new information that justify reopening the financial settlement, like discovering that what was presented as a one-time indiscretion was actually the beginning of an ongoing relationship that was concealed during divorce proceedings," I asked. Diane's eyes lit up with professional interest. "That could certainly qualify. Do you have evidence that their relationship began before the divorce was final?" "Not concrete evidence," I admitted, "but their public relationship began suspiciously soon after the ink was dry on our divorce. And I have witnesses who can testify that Michael repeatedly characterized the infidelity as a meaningless, one-time mistake during our negotiations, a characterization that seems questionable given subsequent events." Diane tapped her pen thoughtfully against her legal pad. "It's not a slam dunk, but it's worth pursuing if you feel strongly about it. The filing alone might bring him back to the negotiating table." "I'm not interested in private negotiations," I said firmly. "I want this on the record. I want a judge to hear the full story." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I understand. I'll prepare the filing." "But Catherine," she hesitated, "are you sure this is about the legal fees and not about something else?" I met her gaze steadily. "It's about accountability, Diane. Michael wants to rewrite our history to make himself feel better about what he did. I won't allow that. The legal fees are legitimate. You and I both know this divorce cost me far more than it should have because of his actions. But yes, this is also about truth, about consequences, about making sure the record is clear." Diane nodded slowly. "As long as you're clear about your motivations, the judge will see through it if this is purely punitive." "It's not punitive," I assured her. "It's corrective." The filing went in the following week, and as expected, Michael's lawyer reached out almost immediately, seeking to settle the matter privately. Diane, following my instructions, politely but firmly declined any settlement that didn't include a court appearance and public acknowledgement of the circumstances. Meanwhile, the Cassandra situation was developing nicely without any further intervention from me. Harold Harrington had indeed investigated her frequent returns to the city and her relationship with Michael. The results were exactly what I'd anticipated. "Catherine," he called me into his office one morning, "I wanted to update you on a staffing matter that may interest you." I took a seat, keeping my expression politely curious. "Yes?" "Cassandra Wilson's position with the firm has been terminated, effective immediately." I widened my eyes in well-practiced surprise. "May I ask why?" Harold's expression was grim. It came to light that she had misrepresented the nature of her transfer request. When confronted with evidence that she had been regularly returning to conduct a personal relationship with the very individual involved in the situation that necessitated her transfer, she became defensive. Unprofessionally so. I nodded thoughtfully. I see. That's unfortunate. Indeed, Harold agreed. The firm takes a dim view of dishonesty, particularly when it results in significant accommodations being made under false pretenses. He leaned forward slightly. I want to assure you that this has no bearing on the potential Boston opportunity we discussed for you. Your professional reputation remains impeccable. Thank you, Harold, I said. I appreciate your transparency. As I left his office, I allowed myself a small smile. Cassandra had lost her job, not because I'd actively sought her termination, but because her own actions and dishonesty had finally caught up with her. A natural consequence exactly as I'd planned. That evening, I received a furious call from Michael. Did you get Cassandra fired? He demanded without preamble when I answered. Hello to you too, Michael, I said calmly. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play innocent, he snapped. Cassandra was fired today. Something about her transfer being under false pretenses. You work at the same firm. This has your fingerprints all over it. I'm afraid you're mistaken, I said, keeping my voice level. I have no authority over HR decisions at the firm. If Cassandra lost her position, it was due to her own actions, not mine. Bullshit, he spat. You've been planning this, haven't you? First the small claims court, now this? What's next, Catherine? When does it end? It ends when there's accountability, I said, letting a hint of steel enter my voice. It ends when you both stop acting like victims of circumstance instead of people who made deliberate choices with real consequences. It ends when the truth matters more than your comfort. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. When Michael spoke again, his voice was quieter but no less angry. You've changed. You used to be kind, forgiving. What happened to you? You happened to me, I said simply. You and Cassandra and that wedding day? You broke something in me, Michael. Now I'm putting myself back together stronger than before. If you don't like the result, you have only yourself to blame. I hung up before he could respond, my heart pounding but my mind clear. It was the most honest conversation we'd had since the wedding, maybe the most honest conversation we'd ever had. And it felt good, cleansing somehow, to finally speak my truth without tempering it to protect his feelings. The hearing for the legal fees was scheduled for the following month. In the meantime, I learned through the grapevine that Cassandra had moved in with Michael, having lost both her job and the Boston apartment that came with it. Their relationship was being tested by real-world pressures far sooner than either had likely anticipated. I focused on my work and my life, determined not to let the upcoming hearing consume me. I started yoga classes, joined a book club, even went on a date arranged by Rebecca, though that particular evening ended with the polite acknowledgement that neither of us felt a spark. Too soon? Rebecca asked when I told her about the lackluster date. Maybe, I said thoughtfully. Or maybe just the wrong person. I'm not closed to the idea of dating, but I'm not desperate for it either. I'm actually enjoying my independence. It was true. For the first time since the wedding disaster, I felt like I was living my life, rather than just reacting to what had happened to me. The revenge plan, or justice plan as I preferred to think of it, was part of that, but not the whole of it. I was rebuilding myself piece by piece. The week before the hearing, Michael made one last attempt to avoid it. Catherine, he said when I answered his call, his voice carefully controlled. My lawyer says you've rejected every settlement offer for the legal fees. That's correct, I confirmed. Why? He asked, frustration bleeding through. What do you want? Just tell me and we can end this. I want exactly what the filing states, I said evenly. Reimbursement for the additional legal fees incurred due to the extraordinary circumstances of our divorce. And I want it acknowledged on the record. This isn't about the money, he said accusingly. This is about punishing me, about dragging me and Cassandra through the mud again. This is about consequences, Michael, I corrected. Natural, reasonable consequences for actions freely taken. If publicly acknowledging what you did feels like punishment, perhaps that says more about your actions than my response to them. He was quiet for a moment. You know Cassandra can't find work now? No law firm will touch her after the way things ended at Montgomery, Bell and Harrington. I felt a flicker of sympathy but pushed it aside. Actions have consequences, I repeated. She knew who you were when she slept with you. She knew I was her colleague. She made her choices with open eyes. And now you're making her pay for it, he said bitterly. No, Michael, I said firmly. She's paying for her own choices, just as you're paying for yours. Just as I've paid for trusting the wrong person. The difference is I didn't do anything wrong. He sighed heavily. I'll see you in court then. Yes, I agreed. You will. The day of the hearing arrived clear and cold, a perfect late autumn morning. I dressed with particular care, a charcoal gray suit that was professional but not severe, understated jewelry, my hair swept back in a sleek chignon. I wanted to project competence, dignity, and calm determination. Diane met me at the courthouse, reviewing our strategy one last time. "Remember, the goal is to appear reasonable and factual," she advised. "No matter what is said, maintain your composure. Let the facts speak for themselves." "I've been preparing for this moment for months," I assured her. "I won't lose control." We entered the courtroom to find Michael and his attorney already seated on the opposite side. Michael was wearing his most expensive suit, the one he'd worn for important client meetings during our marriage, and he'd gotten a fresh haircut. He was trying to make a good impression, just as I was, but there was a tightness around his eyes that betrayed his tension. Cassandra sat directly behind him in the gallery, her expression carefully neutral. She looked different than I remembered, thinner, paler, with a brittleness that hadn't been there before. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away, unable to hold my gaze. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, called the court to order and reviewed the case briefly. "Ms. Montgomery is seeking additional legal fees related to her divorce from Mr. Evans, citing extraordinary circumstances not fully accounted for in the original settlement," she summarized. "Mr. Evans contests this claim. Ms. Montgomery, as the petitioner, your counsel may present first." Diane rose smoothly. "Thank you, Your Honor. The facts of this case are straightforward. My client incurred substantial additional legal fees due to the unusual and traumatic circumstances of her separation from Mr. Evans. As the court may recall from the divorce proceedings, Mr. Evans engaged in infidelity on the eve of their wedding, resulting in a public disclosure during the wedding reception itself." The judge nodded, reviewing her notes. "Yes, I see that in the file. What is not in the file, Your Honor, because it was not known at the time, is that Mr. Evans repeatedly characterized this infidelity as a one-time, meaningless mistake during divorce negotiations. He expressed profound remorse and claimed it was an isolated incident that did not reflect his true feelings for my client." Diane paused, allowing the judge to consider this. "However, immediately following the finalization of divorce, Mr. Evans began openly dating the very woman with whom he had committed the initial infidelity, suggesting a level of premeditation or ongoing attachment that was deliberately concealed during our negotiations." Michael's attorney objected immediately. "Your Honor, my client's current relationship status is irrelevant to the matter of legal fees. Ms. Montgomery received a generous settlement in the divorce, which she agreed to with full legal representation." The judge considered this. "Ms. Harlow, what is the relevance of Mr. Evans's current relationship to the matter at hand?" Diane was prepared for this. "Your Honor, the relevance is twofold. First, it demonstrates that Mr. Evans was not forthright during negotiations, which directly impacted our approach and extended the process, resulting in additional fees. Second, it contextualizes the extraordinary nature of this case. This was not a typical marital breakdown, but a deliberate public humiliation, followed by what now appears to be a calculated deception about the nature of the infidelity." The judge turned to Michael's attorney. "Mr. Brennan, your response?" "Your Honor, my client's personal life following the divorce is his own business. The fact that he is now in a relationship with Ms. Wilson does not prove any deception during the divorce proceedings. It simply indicates that feelings evolved over time, as they often do. Ms. Montgomery received the condo, a substantial financial settlement, and all that she asked for in the divorce. This attempt to extract additional funds appears punitive rather than compensatory." The judge looked thoughtful. "Ms. Montgomery, please take the stand." My heart pounded as I rose and moved to the witness stand. This was the moment I'd been preparing for, the opportunity to tell my story on the record, under oath, with Michael and Cassandra forced to listen. After being sworn in, I sat with perfect posture, hands folded in my lap, the picture of composed dignity. "Ms. Montgomery," Diane began, "please describe the circumstances that led to your divorce from Mr. Evans." I drew a deep breath and began speaking in a clear, steady voice. "Michael and I were married for approximately 6 hours before I discovered his infidelity. During the wedding reception, his brother revealed that Michael had been with another woman the night before our wedding, a colleague of mine named Cassandra Wilson, who was present at the wedding as my guest." "And how did this affect you?" Diane prompted. "It was devastating," I said simply. Beyond the personal betrayal, the public nature of the revelation was profoundly humiliating. 200 guests witnessed what should have been the happiest day of my life become the most mortifying. Additionally, because Miss Wilson was my colleague, the professional ramifications were immediate and ongoing. Please elaborate on those professional ramifications, Diane requested. I had to return to work knowing that everyone was aware of my humiliation. Ms. Wilson requested a transfer to the Boston office, claiming a hostile work environment, which meant that I was implicitly cast as the source of hostility despite being the wronged party. The firm accommodated her request, creating a narrative where I was expected to move on while she escaped any real consequences for her actions. Objection. Michael's attorney interrupted. Ms. Wilson is not a party to this case, and her employment situation is irrelevant. Sustained. The judge ruled. Ms. Montgomery, please confine your testimony to matters directly relating to the legal fees in question. I nodded respectfully. Of course, Your Honor. To address the matter of legal fees specifically, the public and professionally complicated nature of the separation required extensive consultation with my attorney. We had to consider not only the usual divorce matters, but also potential professional implications, reputation management, and the emotional trauma of the situation. This resulted in significantly more billable hours than a typical divorce. And what was Mr. Evans's characterization of the infidelity during your divorce negotiations? Diane asked. Michael repeatedly described it as a one-time drunken mistake that meant nothing, I said, looking directly at him for the first time. His gaze dropped to the table. He expressed profound remorse and claimed it was completely out of character, an isolated incident that he would regret for the rest of his life. And did you believe him at the time? Yes, I said softly. I believed he was genuinely remorseful, even if I couldn't forgive the act itself. I believed the affair was a meaningless error in judgment, not the beginning of a relationship. When did you become aware that Mr. Evans was dating Miss Wilson? Approximately 1 week after our divorce was finalized, I was informed that they were seeing each other openly. They had apparently begun dating while our divorce was still being processed, though they kept it private until the divorce was final. And how did this new information affect your understanding of the divorce proceedings? I took a moment, choosing my words carefully. It made me realize that I had been operating under a false premise during negotiations. I had believed we were working to fairly dissolve a marriage that ended due to a regrettable but isolated incident. Instead, it appears Michael had already begun a new relationship with the very person who had been central to our separation, while leading me and my counsel to believe otherwise. Thank you, Miss Montgomery, Diane said. No further questions at this time. Michael's attorney approached for cross-examination, his expression suggesting he recognized the difficulty of his position. Ms. Montgomery, you received the condo, valued at $1.2 million in the divorce settlement, is that correct? Yes. I confirmed. Michael and I purchased it together during our engagement, using primarily my savings for the down payment. The settlement reflected my greater financial contribution to that asset. And you also received a cash settlement of $200,000, correct? Yes, representing my portion of our joint investments and accounts. Would you say this was a generous settlement? I would say it was a fair settlement based on our respective contributions to the marriage and shared assets, I corrected gently. He tried a different approach. Ms. Montgomery, is it possible that Mr. Evans's relationship with Ms. Wilson developed after the divorce proceedings began, rather than being premeditated as you've implied? Anything is possible, I conceded. But the timing suggests otherwise, as does Michael's repeated insistence during our negotiations that the affair was meaningless and isolated. If feelings were developing, honesty about that would have been appropriate during a process predicated on full disclosure, but you have no concrete evidence that their relationship began before or during the divorce proceedings, do you? I have the evidence of their actions, I said calmly. A relationship public enough to be noticed by mutual acquaintances within days of our divorce being finalized suggests something more established than a brand new connection. The attorney looked frustrated but pressed on. Ms. Montgomery, isn't it true that you've taken several actions recently that could be construed as vindictive toward Mr. Evans and Ms. Wilson? Filing a small claims court case discussing Ms. Wilson's employment situation with her supervisors. Objection, Diane interrupted. Counsel is making accusations without foundation. Sustained. The judge agreed. Mr. Brennan, confine your questions to matters directly related to this case. He regrouped. Ms. Montgomery, what specific additional legal fees are you seeking reimbursement for? I deferred to Diane, who provided a detailed breakdown of the additional consultations, research, and preparation necessitated by the unusual circumstances of the divorce. The questioning continued for another 20 minutes, with Michael's attorney trying different angles to portray my request as punitive rather than compensatory, but I maintained my composed, reasonable demeanor throughout. Finally, it was Michael's turn to testify. He took the stand looking uncomfortable, his usual confidence notably absent. His attorney began with sympathetic questions about the divorce settlement, establishing that Michael had agreed to terms that were financially favorable to me. Then came the more difficult territory. Mr. Evans, when did your relationship with Cassandra Wilson begin in earnest? Michael cleared his throat. After the divorce proceedings were underway. We reconnected several weeks after the separation. So this was not a continuation of the encounter before the wedding? No, Michael insisted. It was a terrible mistake, one night of poor judgment. The relationship developed later, separately. I kept my expression neutral, but internally I noted the careful wording. He wasn't technically lying. They may well have reconnected weeks after the separation, but he was certainly shading the truth. And did you deliberately mislead Ms. Montgomery or her counsel during divorce negotiations? Absolutely not, Michael said firmly. I was completely truthful about the wedding incident. My feelings for Cassandra developed later, during a difficult time when we were both dealing with the fallout of our mistake. I almost admired the performance. He sounded sincere, reasonable, even somewhat vulnerable. If I hadn't known him so well, I might have believed him myself. Diane's cross-examination was surgical. Mr. Evans, you've testified that you reconnected with Ms. Wilson several weeks after your separation from my client. Can you be more specific about the timeline? Michael shifted uncomfortably. I don't recall exactly. Maybe a month after the wedding? We ran into each other and talked about what had happened. And where did this meeting take place, given that Missy Wilson had transferred to Boston specifically to avoid contact with my client? Michael hesitated, realizing the trap. She came back to visit a friend. We happened to be at the same restaurant. A remarkable coincidence, Diane observed dryly. And after this chance encounter, you began dating? Not immediately, Michael said, visibly sweating now. We stayed in touch, talked about our regrets, our mistakes. Eventually it became something more that you never mentioned during divorce negotiations, despite regular meetings with Mrs. Montgomery, where you repeatedly characterized the wedding incident as a meaningless mistake you deeply regretted. I did regret it, Michael insisted. The way it happened, the pain it caused, I'll always regret that. But yes, my feelings for Cassandra changed over time. I didn't think that was relevant to the divorce settlement. Diane raised an eyebrow. You didn't think it was relevant that you were developing a relationship with the very person whose involvement ended your marriage, while simultaneously telling my client that the involvement had been meaningless? Objection, Michael's attorney interjected. Argumentative. Sustained. The judge ruled. Rephrase, counselor. Diane nodded. Mr. Evans, would you agree that full disclosure of developing feelings for Ms. Wilson might have altered the tone or approach of divorce negotiations? Michael looked trapped. Possibly. But those feelings were evolving during the process. I wasn't being deliberately deceptive, just conveniently selective about which truths you shared, Diane suggested. Objection! Withdrawn, Diane said smoothly. No further questions, Your Honor. After brief closing arguments from both attorneys, the judge announced she would take the matter under advisement and issue a ruling within the week. As we filed out of the courtroom, I felt lighter than I had in months, regardless of the outcome. I had told my truth, calmly and clearly, and Michael had been forced to squirm under the weight of his half-truths and omissions. In the hallway outside, I was gathering my things when I heard someone approach. I looked up to find Cassandra standing before me, Michael nowhere in sight. Can I speak with you for a moment? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I considered refusing, but decided against it. Briefly, I agreed. She glanced around nervously. I never apologized to you properly. For what happened before the wedding? For everything after? No, I agreed. You didn't. She looked pained. I'm sorry, Catherine. Truly sorry. What we did was inexcusable. I studied her, trying to gauge her sincerity. Why are you telling me this now? Because you lost your job? Because things are difficult for you? Partly. she admitted, surprising me with her honesty. But also because seeing you today, how dignified you were, how composed, it made me see more clearly what we did to you. The contrast between who you are and who I've been is stark. I felt an unexpected twinge of compassion. Apology accepted, I said finally. But Cassandra? If he cheated with you, he'll cheat on you. Remember that. Her eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. I know. I think I've always known. She hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, I don't think he ever stopped loving you, even now. That's not worth much, I said honestly. Love without respect, without fidelity, without basic decency, that's not love I'm interested in. She nodded again, seeming to accept this. I understand. Thank you for hearing me out. She walked away, shoulders slumped, looking nothing like the confident professional I'd once known. I watched her go, feeling not satisfaction at her evident unhappiness, but a strange sort of peace. Her apology hadn't changed anything about what had happened, but it had affirmed the reality of it, the wrongness of what they'd done, the legitimacy of my pain. 3 days later, the judge's ruling arrived. Michael was ordered to pay 70% of the additional legal fees I'd requested, an amount just over $15,000. The ruling specifically noted that while there was no conclusive evidence of deliberate deception during the divorce proceedings, the unusual circumstances of the separation and the complex professional entanglements had reasonably necessitated additional legal consultation beyond a typical divorce. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was enough. It established on the record that what had happened to me was extraordinary, that the pain and complications I'd endured were real and quantifiable, and that Michael bore responsibility for the consequences of his actions. I forwarded the ruling to Diane with a brief note of thanks, then sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the sunset and feeling the last pieces of my revenge plan, my justice plan, fall into place. Michael paid the ordered amount quickly and without further protest. I heard through mutual friends that he and Cassandra had broken up shortly after the hearing, the strain of her unemployment and the public rehashing of their relationship's origins, apparently too much for their fragile connection. I felt no joy at this news, only a quiet vindication. I hadn't set out to destroy their relationship, only to ensure that they couldn't rewrite our shared history, to cast themselves as star-crossed lovers rather than people who had made selfish, destructive choices. In the months that followed, I continued to rebuild my life. I threw myself into my work, earning a significant promotion and salary increase. I redecorated the condo completely, erasing the last visual reminders of Michael's presence. I traveled, read voraciously, took classes in subjects that interested me, and gradually expanded my social circle beyond the friends we'd shared during our relationship. I even began dating again, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence as I learned to trust my own judgment once more. None of the relationships became serious, but each one helped me remember that I was desirable, interesting, worthy of attention and respect. Rebecca teased me about my harem of casual suitors, but she understood what I was doing, reclaiming my sense of self, piece by piece, relationship by relationship. Almost exactly a year after the wedding disaster, I ran into Michael at a restaurant. I was having dinner with a colleague when he walked in alone, looking tired and older than his years. Our eyes met across the room, and after a moment's hesitation, he approached our table. "Catherine," he said, nodding politely, "you look well." "Thank you," I replied. "How have you been, Michael?" "Managing," he said with a wry smile that didn't reach his eyes. "The firm is keeping me busy." "You? I heard you got the Westridge case. Congratulations." "Thank you," I said again, touched despite myself that he'd kept track of my professional achievements. "It's been challenging but rewarding." An awkward silence fell. My dining companion, sensing the tension, excused himself to take a phone call, leaving Michael and me momentarily alone. "I owe you an apology," Michael said suddenly. "A real one, not the self-serving versions I gave you before." I raised an eyebrow, surprised. "I'm listening." He took a deep breath. "I'm sorry for betraying you, for humiliating you, for trying to minimize what I did afterward, and most of all, for not being the man you deserved." He paused, then added, "You were right, you know. About Cassandra, about me, about everything. I was weak and selfish, and I hurt the best person I've ever known because of it." The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the polished, careful Michael I'd seen in court or during our divorce negotiations. This was raw, genuine remorse. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. Because you deserve to hear it, he said simply. And because I finally understand what I lost. Not just you, but the man I thought I was. The man I wanted to be? He smiled sadly. The man you believed I was? I nodded slowly, absorbing his words. Thank you for saying that. I accept your apology. His eyebrows rose in surprise. You do? Yes, I said, realizing as I spoke that it was true, not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying anger is exhausting, Michael. I'm ready to set it down. Relief washed over his features. I never expected forgiveness from you. It's not forgiveness, exactly, I clarified. It's release. I'm releasing us both from what happened, moving forward without that weight. He nodded, understanding. That's more than I deserve, but I'm grateful for it. My dining companion returned, and Michael took the cue to leave. It was good to see you, Catherine, he said, turning to go. Michael, I called after him, a sudden impulse I couldn't explain. I hope you find what you're looking for. He smiled then, a genuine smile tinged with regret. I found it once. I just didn't recognize it until it was gone. With a final nod, he walked away. I watched him go, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Sadness for what might have been, relief that it wasn't, gratitude for the strength I'd found in the aftermath of losing him. Ex-husband? My colleague asked as he retook his seat. Yes, I confirmed. Ancient history now. And as I said it, I realized it was finally true. The wedding disaster, the public humiliation, the divorce, the revenge. It was all part of my story, but it no longer defined me. It was a chapter, not the whole book. That night, I stood on my balcony under a star-filled sky, reflecting on the journey of the past year. I'd been shattered and had put myself back together differently, stronger in the broken places. I'd sought justice and found it, not in Michael's suffering but in my own healing, in the reclamation of my narrative and my power. The woman who had walked down that aisle a year ago was gone, replaced by someone wiser, more resilient, more deeply herself. Someone who understood that while love was precious, self-respect was essential. Someone who knew that the greatest revenge wasn't making others suffer, but refusing to let their actions diminish your capacity for joy. I raised my glass to the night sky, toasting my own transformation. To the ultimate revenge, I whispered, living well on my own terms. And for the first time since that champagne glass had shattered on the ballroom floor, I felt completely, unconditionally free.